29. I ended up making her cry. It feels like it's been a while since I last talked with you, Kondo-san. As always, Yua's glossy hair had been neatly braided, but perhaps because this was an expedition, she wasn't wearing one of her palace dresses. Even so, her modest one-piece dress didn't look at all like something you'd wear to join a dangerous expedition alongside a night order. Yeah. As he answered, Saikaira casually checked their surroundings. A guard knight stood some distance away, but when his eyes met Saikaira's, he smoothly looked away. It was probably the quieter one from the cafeteria. Meaning, unless something extreme happened, this situation wouldn't turn against him. It had been a long time since they'd talked. Not only because Yua hadn't paid much attention to Saikaira, but because Saikaira had been avoiding her. To be honest, for Saikaira she'd become someone you could call a danger zone, without exaggeration. He knew she meant no harm, but he also knew that, considering their positions and everything else, getting involved with her never led to anything good. And Saikaira also understood that she was exactly the type who didn't understand that. When Yua invited him, they're handing out tea and sweets over there. And he told her he had work to do afterward, she made a troubled face. So, if possible, I'd like you to keep it brief. You see, I want you to switch with me tomorrow during the travel. Yua's carefree thinking, delivered with flushed cheeks as if she'd mustered all her courage, nearly made Saikaira dizzy. Or was that because they were getting closer to the miasma? Silently, Saikaira shot a look at the guard knight. As in, isn't stopping this kind of thing part of your job? But the expressionless guard knight once again slid his gaze away. That bastard. Is that not okay? Because Saikaira didn't answer, Yua looked up at him anxiously. But what should he say? He thought for a moment, then got tired of it. Right. Shurishi-sen, do you understand what this expedition is for? Of course. It's to purify the miasma, right? Yes. And you are the one and only precious saintess who can purify that miasma. At that, Yua smiled bashfully, but that wasn't the point. That's why you ride in the same carriage as the royals, surrounded by guard knights prepared for anything. Words she'd surely heard repeatedly before departure today. As expected, Yua drooped, yet still pouted in dissatisfaction. But she had to listen to what came next. And I'm the person in this world who's most susceptible to miasma damage. That's because you don't have resistance to mana? Exactly. In terms of the world we came from, I weaken just by breathing outside air. And now I'm going to a place saturated with gas that would make even normal people sick. I will definitely die. What? Camille the Chancellor, and Aresh too, must have said this to her countless times, but Yua, who had been present, just stared wide-eyed. No, it can't be that bad. No. I'll die. 100%. In fact, since coming to this world, I've already nearly died twice. The first time was poisoning from overdosing on nutritional supplements. The second time was the assault by the man who had been standing in front of him as the Saintess's guard. You're saying this lightly, but what you're proposing right now is increasing the workload of the people protecting you, and also increasing the chance that I die. Yua's feelings for Aresh were painfully obvious, but Saikaira didn't want the formation disrupted for that, and he certainly didn't want extra work. And Saikaira didn't want to die over something like that. They were only going to get closer and closer to places where the miasma was thicker. Aresh's behavior felt excessive at times, but the reality was that Saikaira's safety simply wasn't possible without him. That's not. I didn't mean. The sight of the girl shaking her head, eyes filling with tears, might have stirred pity. But unfortunately, Saikaira's emotions didn't move even 1 millimeter. It's about time you start thinking properly. This isn't a world where peaceful days continue forever while you just do whatever people tell you. Because Saikaira planned to crush this little girl's glittering future as a saintess. So you said something to the saintess? After dinner, Aresh, naturally, was relaxing in Saikaira's assigned room when Saikaira, sorting the information gathered from civil officials, turned around. Yua had obviously seemed unwell during dinner. Still, the fact that she hadn't shut herself away and had come out at all was something worthy of praise. If the saintess didn't attend the dinner hosted by the local lord whose mansion they were staying in, it would be a public slight, mud on the lord's face. The first prince was impressive too. He covered for Yua's lack of energy by saying, "The fatigue of travel is catching up to her," and still properly thanked the lord. Saikaira had thought him a hopeless saintess-obsessed fool, but he would have to revise his opinion. Where did you hear that? Still holding his documents, Saikaira turned his chair. Aresh, on the bed, rose slowly and reached out. Before he knew it, Saikaira was seated between Aresha's legs on the bed. Yet Saikaira's hands still didn't release the papers. From the Saintess's guard. I told His Highness to keep it quiet. That's helpful. If that prince found out Saikaira had made you cry, he'd probably toss him into the forest. I thought you weren't interested in the Saintess. With an arm around Saikaira's waist, Aresh murmured. Saikaira tilted his head. How could I not be? She was the one who had dragged him into this world, the cause, the trigger, and also the only means to deal with the disaster threatening the country's survival. Of course, the real culprit was the nation's leadership that performed the Saintess summoning, so it wasn't like Saikaira hated Yua. He felt sorry for her, a normal high school girl forced to live in another world, setting his own situation aside. He didn't resent her, but he did want her to face reality soon. I see. Aresh-sama? Shouldn't you return to your own room soon? I'll go back after you stop working and get into bed. So you don't intend to go back? You don't intend to sleep? Oops. That was stepping on a landmine. After that, his documents were confiscated, he was shoved into bed, and he had no choice but to sleep. He saw Yua near the stables before departure. She very obviously averted her eyes awkwardly, so maybe keeping it secret from the prince had been pointless. Under Julius's sharp gaze, Saikaira tried, just a little, to hide in Diana's shadow. They arrived at the second day's lodging around noon. They'd decided to rest there, since beyond that point was land where miasma damage began to appear. Then depart early the next morning and reach the demon forest. Saikaira had once again worked endlessly atop the horse that day. So to be safe, he had barrier layered again and again, then fell asleep held in Aresha's arms. And then day 3. At last, the party arrived at the demon forest.